Dear listeners, I have so much to tell you, and I often don't know where to start. It seems the world doesn't want to admit that sometimes we make mistakes and that sometimes the wrong person gets punished for something they didn't do. Not all of us have been personally affected, but many of us have been impacted by this reality. And I feel like it's my responsibility to share these stories with you and to tell you what I've learned about wrongful convictions. Welcome back to Wrongfully Yours. And today we're bringing you a perspective that's rarely heard in conversations about wrongful convictions. It's that of a young person who found herself swept into the chaos of a wrongful accusation and ultimately what ended up as a wrongful conviction. Not as a legal expert or an advocate, but simply as a 13-year-old family friend. My guest today, Monique, grew up closely connected to the family of Canadian exoneree Ron Dalton. At an age when most of us are just beginning to figure out the world, Monique was trying to make sense of a tragic death, an accusation of murder, and the sudden reshaping of the lives of the people around her, including three very young children taken in by her family's closest friends. This conversation is a powerful reminder that wrongful convictions don't just affect the accused. They ripple outward, touching families, friends, and entire communities. And so today, this is a conversation of compassion, resilience, and growth in the face of the unexpected. I am joined today by a family friend of Ron Dalton, who was only 13 years of age when Ron started experiencing his whole legal nightmare. And I think that this is such a unique perspective to bring to the conversation of wrongful convictions because I don't think people think that it's a young person's problem. And Monique, you're here today to tell us quite the opposite. So, welcome.
Thank
And
you,
I'm
Kelly.
just hoping you can start by sharing with us a little bit of who you are and how you got sucked into this crazy world of wrongful convictions.
Absolutely. First of all, it's really nice to see you and talk to you again. We had such a great conversation when we met a couple weeks ago. Yes, I was pulled into this saga, this drama as a young person. Clearly, I'm not a young person anymore. I'm close to
Young
50.
enough.
Fair enough. But I've had a lot of time to reflect on it. And you're right. So in the summer of 1988, I was 13 years old, about to be 13, and my parents' best friends were a couple that lived not far from us who had three really, really young children. And the wife, her brother Ron Dalton, who I didn't know, was accused and jailed for the death of his young wife, Brenda, which happened in Newfoundland. I knew at the time that they had three young kids. That's really all I knew, and that those three young kids were coming to live with my parents' friends, Sonny and Linda, who at the time, like I said, had three really young kids of their own, three boys under the age of 5. And so I knew all of a sudden that there was a death, there was an accusation and jail, and then suddenly the lives of these people that I knew really well were upended, dealing with grief and uncertainty, plus having to become parents, if you will, for three really young children experiencing the most traumatic thing that you can experience as a young child, being the death of a parent, coupled with
Right.
their father being not there now because he was in jail in connection with her
And
death.
and you're only 13 and you're
Mhm.
having to kind of take all this in and make sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, this is hard enough for me to comprehend at slightly older than 13 years old. So, how do you even go about dealing with this and making sense of it?
That's a great question. I think at the time I was really focused on the logistics. Where were people? Where was he in jail? Where were those kids? Where were they going to stay in the house? This was not a family that had a ton of extra income that could really. So I was thinking about the logistics and what was happening next. And would there be a funeral, would he be allowed to come to the funeral? Because we were in Prince Edward Island, he was in jail in Newfoundland. What were the dynamics going to be between his in-laws, the parents of Brenda who passed away, and these other people? So I was thinking much more in terms of the logistics and who's going to take care of the things and who's going to take care of the children and what are the kids like and will they what will they be like when we go over to visit? Are
Sure.
they going to be traumatized, not able to play? These kids were 1.5, 6, and 9 years of age. So I was really worried, like how will I relate to them? Will I
Right.
be able to relate to them, to play with them, to, be around them like I am with other cousins and things like that? So I was worried about, really focused on the logistics. At the same time, also having this awareness that there was a death and an accusation that it was a homicide. And, at the time, the thinking wasn't so much about, you know, wrongful conviction and he did or didn't do it. I didn't know the family, didn't
I
know
was
the
gonna say, and
details.
I don't think at
No,
any 13-year-old in their mind that wrongful conviction is even a thing. Like, of course, this wouldn't
no,
cross your mind.
no. So it was, well, how, you know, I know that I was mature enough to know that people do commit homicide. Um, but it was never really a question of did he or didn't he do it. It was, these were the facts. This is where he was. What's going to happen next? How is it going to change the dynamic when we visit with this family? And what events will transpire from here?
So, for you, again, as a young person, you're being made aware of all of this. And like you say, your concerns are kind of like, what's next and what's happening? And
Mhm.
as things progressed, did you ever I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Like, did you ever feel any kind of apprehension or, worry of interacting with this family? Or it was just normal for you, like just a normal interaction that you're going to continue to interact with this family?
I've thought about that many times over the years because my recollection is that no, I didn't have that apprehension. I didn't have that worry. I had that awareness that there's this really weird situation. First, this family dynamic with all of the kids living with our family friends, plus this criminal element of it. So I knew it was really unusual, but I don't ever recall feeling apprehensive about being sort of on the periphery of this. Even when we learned that, and I remember thinking that this was unusual, and to be honest, I'm not a legal expert by any means, so I don't know if it is unusual. But when Ron was granted bail from Newfoundland and was permitted to come and live in Prince Edward Island while he awaited his first trial, to be in the same home with his sister and brother-in-law and his 3 kids and his 3 nephews. At the time, I remember thinking, "That seems unusual." But I remember wondering if my parents would make a decision that, like, "No, we're out. Like, this is too much." But I never felt that that was anything that they even considered, and we just continued to visit them. We continued to have them over for Sunday dinners, and like I said, my impression immediately was this person who was quote unquote an accused murderer was like every other um adult male in my life in the way that he interacted with his kids, interacted with his nephews, interacted with other adults, like was personable. Hi, I'm Ron. How are you? What grade are you in? So it was so normal, which in
Right.
retrospect, see, is what made it unusual, but it was all a very normal interaction. At the same time, knowing very well that the phones at the house were tapped. There was constant presence by RCMP. I don't mean constant, but frequent. You could
Sure.
see them patrolling. So all of that was happening, which was all really unusual, but the dynamic of the people that the adults fostered was a really normal family dynamic.
That's incredible to hear, and that actually makes me feel so good because, I mean, Linda has 6 kids that she's
Mhm.
essentially raising now, and then you bring yourself in, so there's 7 children
Mhm.
that are being brought into this situation, and the fact that the family dynamic felt just like any other family dynamic is amazing. And I don't think that anybody could ask for anything better. I also just want to go back to you were saying that your parents never, um, never at least presented to you the vibe that, oh, we need to distance ourselves, we need to pull away from these people because they're bad news, which I think is really a testament to the strength of their character because something that the wrongfully convicted individuals talk about over and over again is the stain on the reputation and the court of public opinion. Because often, as soon as you hear, oh, this person is accused of doing
Mhm.
something, there's this immediate connect the dots that, well, they did do it. And I mean, there's not much more serious than homicide. So it would be so easy for your parents to say, like, and we're done dealing with these people because there's a killer in their family.
Yep.
And yet everything just kind of went on the way it normally did.
Absolutely. And I would think, I'm really eager to have a conversation with my mom. My dad since passed away, but I've been jotting down notes of things that I want to chat about with my mom to get what her thinking was. I'm making assumptions, but certainly no, from my perspective, there was no uncomfortableness in my family around it. There was no discussion or no awareness that we would stop hanging out with them. There even actually seemed to be an increase. Like we knew we could hang out with them. We knew they were welcome at our house. So I think that it was quite the opposite, that my parents and they have a great affinity for Sunny and Linda. And I mentioned that as well. Sunny and Linda are givers as well. And so they just all were really close, and I think that the ages of all the kids made it easy for us to hang out together, and I gotta correct you, it wasn't just adding 1. My family, I also have a brother and a sister, so there's 3,
Oh,
3, and 3. So when we got together, there's 9 kids.
wow.
In a just a regular family home, having a family supper, the adults table, the really big kids table, 9 kids running around, entertaining each other, playing with each other. My sister and I were the oldest, so we were taking care of the babies and having like fighting over, I'm going to take care of this baby and that baby, you know, that teenage maternal instinct that kinks in. But no, there was a lot of kids.
That's amazing. And so as far as you remember, was there anything wrong? Like, I mean, you know that there's legal
Yeah.
stuff going on,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you never had a sense that there was anything wrong.
No. So it was really strange. I was the oldest of all the 9 kids, so sometimes I would interact with the little ones, and other times I wasn't, and I would pick up a book in the living room or a family photo album and I would overhear the conversations at the kitchen table that the adults were having. And it was extremely strange because on one hand they're talking about one of the kids had hockey this weekend and we got to get him here and got to get him there. But there's also conversations about we're taking Ron's kids to the prison next week. So we got to get them out of school. We check with the school and do that. So and so is going to stay with the other 3. And oh, and there's the custody issue that's happening with the in-laws who sued Sunny and Linda for custody of the 3 kids. So all of that was woven into this coffee talk that was happening at the kitchen table, but it was all woven into all the normal conversations that I heard at the kitchen tables of every other family friend or cousins that I visited about what was happening with the kids and different things. So to this day, I look back on that and think that that was really unique. There wasn't this militant discussion all the time about the case, or he's innocent, or we have to figure this out. It wasn't that. It was just sort of woven in as part of all the other things that they were dealing with. And there was never um I was never felt, or I was never made to believe that there was one set of facts that we had to live by and tell the story of. The story was he was in jail awaiting trial. The kids were here. That was the story. It was never he was wrongfully accused or we need to get him out. Like it was just there was no judgment. It was just
Right.
this is the reality we're dealing with.
I was going to ask, like, was there any discussion of this is a mistake? Ron should be at home. He didn't do this. This wasn't a murder. Was that ever a discussion, or was it just we have to deal with what's going on right now?
At the time I was aware of what was later presented as evidence that he had claimed that she choked eating cereal and that there was dispute or disagreement between that and what the prosecution was alleging was that he manually strangled her. I was aware that those were the basic facts of the case, but again, it was really just an awareness and the discussions were around next steps and making sure that the lawyers were engaged and involved and waiting for trial, things like that.
Right. And so you're growing up alongside Sonny and Linda's kids and then
Mm-hmm.
Ron's kids.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron was gone for 13 years. And I mean, that's a long time
Mm-hmm.
to grow up. And so you
Mm-hmm.
watched his children
Mm-hmm.
grow. What was that like? How was it like knowing that their father was in prison? And did you ever feel like you had to treat them differently because of the situation? Or was it just so normalized for you?
It it was so normalized, and we had met Ron because before his first trial, he was there living at the house. There was never, as much as there was not a lot of outward talk about he did or didn't do it or anything, there was never anything hidden. Adults didn't hush when the kids walked into the kitchen or the living room
Oh,
or
okay.
wherever they were talking. Any of the kids, none of the,
Wow.
no, whether it was me and my siblings or the others, I mean, reasonably, but it was very open what was happening. So I think to answer your question, no, by that time, once I had initially met them and I had, I met them under the umbrella of you're here because your dad's in jail because they think he hurt your mom and that's how I'm being introduced to you, how and why. But once that initial introduction happened, again, they were so young and we were all kids. It was just like, okay, we're here. The parents are making supper. We got to entertain ourselves or entertain each other. So from that point on, and because we did spend a lot of time with Sunny Lynn and their family growing up, they were like every other cousin that we knew. So
Wow.
um wondering about whether we treated them different. I'd like to say I didn't,
Sure.
but I certainly was aware that they were facing a situation that I couldn't relate to and no one I knew could relate to.
I'm noticing that we're just about at time. And I feel like that is such an important conversation that I would love to dig into a little bit more if you would be willing to join me again next time.
Absolutely, would love to.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we will chat with you again next time.
Thanks, Kelly.
Monique's unique and personal perspective on what it's like to grow up alongside a wrongful conviction reminds us that these cases don't happen in isolation. They impact entire families, entire communities, and in this case, even the kids who were just trying to make sense of the world. What stood out to me most was the way Monique described how normal everything felt, even in the most abnormal of circumstances. It's a testament to the strength of the families involved, the resilience of the children, and the power of compassion during times of crisis. So, if you found today's conversation meaningful, be sure to join us next time when Monique and I continue this conversation and dig even deeper into how Ron's wrongful conviction shaped the years that followed. And while today's letter may have piqued your interest, this is only part of the story. There's still so much more to tell. The effects of wrongful convictions are far reaching. They touch us all. I'll write to you again soon as I continue my conversations with those whose lives have been impacted by a wrongful conviction. But until then, I remain wrongfully yours. If you have something that you want to talk about with me, or even if you want to just send me some words of encouragement, you can drop me a line at wrongfullyyourspodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out my website, kellylozon.ca, for more information about me and the kinds of things that I do. And if today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others, liking and following the podcast on your favorite platforms so you don't miss what comes next. And as always, thank you for listening to Wrongfully Yours, where we believe that telling these stories is the first step towards preventing the next injustice. And until next time, stay curious, stay hopeful, and keep fighting for justice.